Hey everyone, it's Julie. Thank you so much for joining me. In my last video, I talked a little bit about how I've been culling my deck library and how I want to be more mindful and considerate with the decks that I'm bringing into my collection moving forward. And that got me to looking at my current library and taking note of the shared characteristics in my decks. And so I thought I would just do this kind of fun video that I have titled Deck Delights and Deterrents. So I'm just going to give an overview of some of the characteristics of decks that I really enjoy and find delight in, and then ones that I don't, and ultimately can influence whether I purchase a deck or not. So these are in no particular order, and we will start off with my deck delights. So the first one is that I like human-themed decks. I have seen other decks like, for instance, the Spacious Tarot and the Augenblick Tarot. Beautiful decks, beautiful. And because they don't have people in them, humans depicted, I know that they would not be the types of decks that I would reach for. I like seeing figures in my decks. I like looking at their expressions and what they're wearing and what they're doing. And, of course, a huge bonus if, on top of it being human themed, it is also diverse and inclusive. Another characteristic that delights me in a tarot deck is what I've heard people call the big head, big eyed girls, what I have sometimes called the bobbleheads. And if you have seen any Jasmine Beckett Griffith deck, this is Alice the Wonderland, you will know exactly what I mean. I love these big-headed, big-eyed bobbleheads. I mean, they're cute and yet creepy, and I really like that combination. So I am definitely attracted to illustrations like this. Another characteristic that I love in decks is when they have a bright or pastel color scheme. I do have a couple that are black and white, and then a couple more that maybe have more subdued color palette. But on the whole, it really brings me joy to see a deck that uses bright or pastel colors. So some quick examples right here. We have the Lightseers Tarot. Just beautiful color scheme. Very bright and vibrant. And it just really makes the details pop. And it's like eye candy. And then for a more kind of pastel look, we have the Luna Soul. And this is a deck that Vivi over at Mystic Sunchild and I have been chatting about, and so I had angrily put it on my shelf after it's been giving me some attitude, and then took it back off my shelf to have another look. But this, I really, really love the palette. A lot of pinks and just soft blues. Another delight, which is a major current that runs throughout my decks, is the fantasy or old world theme. And I mean, as you saw with the Lightseers, I do have a couple more modern style decks, but on the whole, fantasy and the kind of old world genres, they have been longtime favorites of mine since I was little. And watching shows and movies and reading literature and looking at art. And so, and you'll see examples of this as we go through the rest of this video. and if you've seen past videos of mine. I would say a more recent characteristic that has really grown on me is good photo manipulation or stock imagery. In the past, I would have considered it a deterrent, but not so much anymore, because I have found decks that I think have manipulated photography or stock imagery very seamlessly. So one example here is my Tarot de la Nuit, Tarot de la Cosplay. And I think that, just my personal opinion, I think that this is photo manipulation that is done fairly well. Again, as you can see, fantasy type theme, but I just think that the details run together very well. Nothing seems to be jarring. And then another example is the Rusted Lenormand by Don Michel over at Boho Tarot. I've definitely shown this deck before, and I have also mentioned how much I love what she's done with this deck. You know, the imagery is just cohesive, and it is stock imagery, but she has really knocked it out of the park with this one in terms of how she has added her own embellishments to the designs. So it really flows as a deck. Pip style tarot decks are another delight that has grown throughout the last year. If you would have asked me at the beginning of my tarot journey whether Pip style decks would be something I'd be interested in, I would have said hell no. I had a lot of misconceptions about Pip decks, but after learning about them, after learning about numerology, I have truly grown to appreciate and really enjoy using Pip decks. So for instance, we have the Tarot of a Moon Garden here, and this was the very first Pip deck that I purchased. And I didn't use it for the longest time because I didn't really know how. Now these pips are more scenic, and they do provide more details for you to go on and to help you out that lean to RWS. But yeah, there were just a lot of other pips where, you know, something like this, I would have just stared at that and would not have known how to interpret that card. And so since practicing, I have really come to love using this deck, and it's become easier to use it. And those are my deck delights. For those of you who have been with my channel for any period of time, they were probably not huge surprises for you. And these deterrents won't be either. But if you are new to my channel, those are the things that I really truly enjoy. And when it comes to picking decks in the future, these characteristics will be ones to attract me. And I have to be careful that when it comes to purchasing a deck, that there is not something already in my collection that would scratch that same itch. Now on to my deck deterrents. And I refrain from using the term deal breaker, because as soon as I call something a deal breaker, my ass will be out there purchasing a deck with said deal breaker. So we will just call them deterrents. Now, many of you out there will love these characteristics and aspects. I, on the other hand, find them off-putting, and it does influence me against a deck. But you never know, maybe in the future, some of these deterrents will become delights. Anything's possible. Now, the first one that I have listed is bad tactile experience. I do have a VR to Casper, the Boy Diviner, and his tag Cardstock Snob that talks a little bit about this. But ultimately, thick cardstock that I can't shuffle, large cards that are too big for my hands, rose petal finish that I can't shuffle. Now, I know people have said, oh, you can throw powder or cornstarch on rose petal cardstock and it'll be fine. My lazy self is not going to do that. I'm just not. So these are definitely deterrents for me when it comes to a deck. Now, Oracle decks are an exception in that most of the time Oracle decks will be larger in size. So in that case, I do make some allowances. The second deterrent for me is initials or names on the back of the cards. I don't know why publishers or deck creators think that's a great idea, because I haven't really heard anyone say that they absolutely love that. So, I don't mind if the backs aren't reversible, but I just don't, for some reason, I'm not a fan of initials or the deck creator's name or the deck's name on the backs of my cards. Now, I do have the Darkwood Tarot that does display the initials of the title. And that's a little more subtle. I'm not mad at it. I still don't love it. The third deterrent for me is decks with imagery of human figures with things sprouting from their necks, like non-human features sprouting from their necks. So, for instance, I believe it's the Dark Days Tarot. I really, really love many of the images in that deck. And I love the shape of the deck. It's a square deck. I don't have any square decks. Well, that's not true. I do have like smaller Lenormand decks. But in terms of tarot, I just really love that deck. What holds me back is some of the images have like these humanoid figures with like things sprouting from their heads. And I can't even remember what it is that's sprouting. Maybe some type of vegetation. I know that plants, that seems to be a common thing when you see that in decks. Like you've got the human body and then like a tree or leaves or I don't know. Or the human is like part tree. Now, I don't mind, for whatever reason, it doesn't bother me as much if like the top portion of a figure is human and then you've got the bottom portion that's not, like, say, a centaur or like a mermaid. But when it's flipped, that does deter me from that deck. Another deterrent is a deck that is animal themed, especially if the animals are highly anthropomorphized, like they're wearing clothes and walking on their hind legs like a human would. Now, there are exceptions, of course, and one of them is unicorns and cats. Those two animals, I do have two unicorn decks, and I do have, I think, one cat deck. And also my Sawyer's Nature Portals is another huge exception. That is one of the only kind of fully animal-themed deck that I have that doesn't have unicorns or like a predominant cat theme. But other than that, yeah, and the thing is, I love animals. I've said this before in past videos. I love animals. I love the look of animal-themed decks. I love the idea of animal-themed decks. I just don't pick them up. For whatever reason, once I get them, I just don't use them as much as my human-themed decks. Now, another exception is if animals are mixed in with humans. Forest of Enchantment Tarot is a perfect example of this, where you do have humans, and then here you have animals that are anthropomorphized in a sense. But you know, I don't mind this because I guess the other exception would be that the animals, while they are anthropomorphized, they are done so in a way that is very it has the tone of folktale or fable. So for example, the Hermit card, we have an anthropomorphized badger, maybe. And, you know, images like this don't bother me because it does have a very kind of Aesop's fable type of feel. This is the kind of imagery that I would see in storybooks that I read as a child. And so that is an exception for me. And so this is why this deck works on so many levels. I've mentioned earlier that Pip style decks are a delight for me. Marseille style decks are not. They are definitely a deterrent. The aesthetic is just not my thing. I don't like the often garish and harsh colors. I don't find the style of illustration to be all that compelling. And I have tried kind of variants of kind of an old traditional Marseille style deck, like for instance, the marshmallow Marseille I did have for a brief time, because at least the color scheme was more pastel, which attracted me. And it had, I guess, a little bit of a more whimsical quality to it. And it was still traditional enough that I just couldn't with it. I just couldn't. My final deterrent, also related to Pip Decks, is that, and this might sound quite silly, but I do not like Pip Decks that use Roman numerals. I'm talking about the minors and the suits. When you have a Roman numeral and then just the symbols in their configurations, yes, I can figure it out, but I'm also an impatient person, and it just takes me a little too long for things to compute. And now if you have like 3 or 4 cards in a spread and you've got, you know, pips, and they're all different Roman numerals and all different, you know, configurations, it just annoys me. So I would rather a Pip deck have the Arabic numbers, or, you know, the numbers spelled out. So for instance, my Inspired Soul Tarot, that is the very reason why I used the Arabic. And, you know, I have the elemental symbol here. Now, if I had used the elemental symbol plus the Roman numeral, like this, I don't know, maybe because I did create the deck myself, I might have still been able to identify the card in a second, but then lay this out with, you know, how many other minors, I don't know. I think it would have just taken me a hot minute. And I like my readings to be very fluid. So, and again, as you've seen with the Tarot of the Moon Garden, you know, if you have a card like this, see, I wouldn't know how to read that with a Roman numeral. It would just take me too long. But the fact that it's spelled out really helps a lot. I know, it's silly, and it's my truth. So those were my deck delights and deterrents. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to hear about some of your delights and your deck deterrents. So drop a comment below, or you can make a video, and I will see you in the next one. Much love and take care.